From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now! Caught on tape, a recording of Blackwater owner Erik Prince reveals details of previously undisclosed activities of the notorious private military firm and provides a stunning glimpse into his future plans. In a Democracy Now! Exclusive broadcast, we play excerpts of the recording and speak with investigative journalist Jeremy Scahill, who obtained the tape. Then ongoing protests in Greece, where the government commits to severe austerity measures in return for a multi-billion-dollar euro bailout from the EU and IMF. And today marks the 40th anniversary of the Kent State shootings.
40 years ago, we raised hell on this campus. We planted the seeds of revolt, which blossomed a year later when 4 days of protest culminated with the shootings by the National Guard. Only bullets could silence our voices here at Kent State in 1970.
On May 4th, 1970, National Guardsmen opened fire on hundreds of unarmed students at an anti-war rally at Kent State University in Ohio, killing 4, injuring 9. We'll go to Kent State to speak with Laurel Krauss, the sister of Allison Krauss, one of the 4 students killed. She's organizing a Kent State Truth Tribunal. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. A Pakistani-born U.S. citizen has been arrested in connection with Saturday's attempted car bombing in Times Square, New York. Attorney General Eric Holder announced the arrest late last night.
Earlier this evening, Faisal Shahad was arrested in connection with the attempted car bombing in New York on Saturday. Mr. Shahad, an American citizen, was taken into custody at JFK Airport in New York as he attempted to board a flight to Dubai.
Authorities said Faisal Shahad was already on board the flight at the time of his arrest. 2 other passengers were also removed from the plane. Shahad is scheduled to appear in Manhattan federal court today to face charges. He reportedly recently returned from a trip to Pakistan. Earlier today, a spokesperson from the Pakistan Taliban disowned a video attributed to the group claiming responsibility for the attempted bombing. In the Gulf of Mexico, an estimated 210,000 gallons of oil a day are still pouring into the Gulf following the April 20th explosion aboard an oil rig operated by BP. On Monday, BP officials said it was attempting to build an enormous funnel to help contain the busted well that's gushing oil into the Gulf. John Curry, the director of public affairs at BP, outlined the plan, but he acknowledged the company's unsure it will work.
This is a collection system. It's part of our subsea oil recovery system that we're designing. And essentially, it's a 98-ton rectangular box that will be lowered over the major source of the leak at the seabed and funnel the oil through the box, through the top, and channel it all the way to the surface where we will have a ship that will be able to collect it and capture the oil and minimize the impact of the environment.
In Washington, White House Press Secretary Robert Gibbs was questioned about the crisis, which some say could turn out to be the worst industrial environmental disaster in U.S. history.
Is it your commitment that BP will pay all costs associated with this bill?
That is our commitment, yes.
Including like lost wages and that sort of thing?
That's specifically one of the things the President spoke with Thad Allen about and with Paris presidents and fishermen yesterday, is setting up a system, and Secretary Napolitano talked about this morning, setting up a system for compensation and claims that isn't bogged down.
While Robert Gibbs said it's the administration's commitment to make BP pay all costs associated with the spill, an obscure 1990 law may shield BP from paying just $75 million in economic damages related to the spill. On Monday, Democratic Senator Robert Menendez introduced a bill to raise the economic damages liability cap from $75 million to $10 billion. Menendez called the bill the Big Oil Bailout Prevention Act. The Obama administration's coming under increasing pressure to reverse its decision to open up large swaths of the Atlantic, Gulf, and Alaskan coast to offshore oil and gas drilling. On Monday, California Governor Schwarzenegger withdrew his support to expand oil drilling off California's coast. In the weeks leading up to the oil rig explosion, President Obama claimed offshore rigs are safe.
It turns out, by the way, that oil rigs today generally don't cause spills. They are technologically very advanced. Even during Katrina, the spills didn't come from the oil rigs. They came from the refineries on shore.
President Obama speaking on April 2nd, 18 days before the BP rig exploded. Meanwhile, the Huffington Post reports National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration officials warned the Department of Interior last fall that it was dramatically underestimating the frequency of offshore oil spills and was dangerously understating the risk and impacts a major spill would have on coastal residents. Advocates for a free and open Internet are expressing alarm over reports that Federal Communications Commission Chair Julius Genachowski is leaning toward keeping broadband deregulated and not reclassifying it as a telecommunications service. Josh Silver of the group Free Press said, quote, such a decision would destroy net neutrality. It would deeply undermine the FCC's ability to ensure universal Internet access for rural, low-income, and disabled Americans. It will undermine the FCC's ability to protect consumers from price gouging and invasions of privacy, he said. Silver warned that unless the FCC reestablishes authority over the nation's Internet service providers, companies like Comcast, AT&T, and Verizon will be able to slow down, block, or censor content at will. U.S., British, Canadian, French, and other officials walked out of a speech by the Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad on Monday. Ahmadinejad spoke at a United Nations conference in New York, reviewing the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. While world powers accused Iran of failing to comply with disclosure requirements of the treaty, Ahmadinejad used his speech to attack the United States for its past use of nuclear weapons and for threatening to use nukes again.
Considering any threat to use nuclear weapons or attack against peaceful nuclear facilities as a breach of international peace and security, and swift reaction from the United Nations through the termination of all cooperation of NPT member states with the threatening aggressor state.
Secretary of State Hillary Clinton later accused Iran of trying to divert attention from its own record and to attempt to evade accountability.
It has defied the UN Security Council and the IAEA and placed the future of the non-proliferation regime in jeopardy. And that is why it is facing increasing isolation and pressure from the international community. But Iran will not succeed in its efforts to divert and divide.
Meanwhile, the Pentagon has revealed for the first time the size of its nuclear arsenal. There are 5,113 nuclear warheads in its stockpile and several thousand more retired nukes that await dismantling. The U.S. said the size of the stockpile is 75% smaller than in 1989. Many other nuclear nations, including China and Israel, have never publicly disclosed how many warheads are in their arsenals. In news from Afghanistan, Defense Secretary Robert Gates has signed an order to send 850 more U.S. military personnel to help train local security forces. The trainers are expected to serve for up to 120 days. A recent Pentagon report said, quote, one of the most significant challenges to the growth and development, unquote, of the Afghan security forces was the shortage of trainers. In Egypt, a new wave of labor protests are sweeping the country. This weekend, hundreds of activists and laborers demonstrated in Cairo demanding a rise in the minimum wage that has not changed in over 2 decades and is now worth just $6 a month. Journalist Hossam El-Hamalawi explained the workers' demands.
Today, the Egyptian workers and labor campaigners are coming to Hussein Hijazi Street in front of the ministerial cabinet here in order to call upon the government to raise the national minimum wage from the pathetic 35 Egyptian pounds, which remain unchanged since 1984, to the well-deserved 1,200 Egyptian pounds a month, which is enough just to raise the population to the poverty line. That's what the population is asking for.
This latest wave of protests was set off by a court ruling earlier this year in favor of raising the national minimum wage to 1,200 Egyptian pounds a month, which approximates $215 US. Egyptian worker and labor activist Nagi Rashad is the man who